I had a lovely conversation with the award-winning South African actor and voice artist Langley Kirkwood. Langley plays the villain Buckley on HBOMAX's Warrior. It's been surreal to speak with so many cast members from both Warrior and Banshee. Langley shares his love for Capetown, triathlons, and acting. As an admirer of his work, it was fascinating to hear about how his triathlon training complements his acting process. Langley has an extensive knowledge of World War II history, and we delved into a comparison of that era to the world we live in today. He also shares his admiration and respect for his fellow Warrior cast members and stunt performers, especially fellow actor Hoon Lee. If you hear any interruptions, we did have a few dropped Zoom calls during the episode, so we appreciate your understanding. Since Langley is so kind and patient, we did get a good laugh about it, and you can watch our outtakes on YouTube. Now, on with the show. Hello, Langley. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
You're most welcome, Mimi. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a great honor.
Oh my goodness. The honor is all mine. I am super psyched to talk to you for so many reasons. Obviously, I've been talking to a lot of your castmates from Warrior. And so this just feels like, I'm part of the family now, but also you are in Capetown. And I am psyched to hear a little bit about that. Obviously, there's been this pandemic going on the last year and a half or so. And so travel's been a little nil, but I've been kidding about showing up to Capetown and being on set since Brett Chan, not so wisely invited me to come out because I'm the type of person that just shows up. But I really would love to hear a little bit about, the lovely, town that is, and everyone has spoken so fondly of it that I've spoken to. So being that you are there now, just tell me a little bit about what it was like kind of growing up there. It's just definitely on one of my places to go.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off by saying I didn't actually grow up in Cape Town.
Okay.
I've lived here for most of the last 25 years, but I grew up in Johannesburg, which is up north and the northern part of the country, and is very different. It's a very different part of the country and a different part of the world to Cape Town. And Johannesburg was a mining city and is a relatively new city, young city by Western standards. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was founded in the 1880s when gold was discovered. Gold was discovered just before that, and so almost around the same time that San Francisco was booming as a city after the San Francisco gold strike. About 20 years later is when the gold strike happened in South Africa. And that's why there are all these weird connections between Australia, San Francisco, and South Africa from that time, because there were lots of miners and people who were drawn to gold strikes and gold mining who kind of gravitated to those parts of the world.
Wow. I didn't know I was going to get a history lesson. This is bonus. This is bonus material right here.
Yeah, I mean, I've read up on a lot of, the history of San Francisco, obviously over the period of Warrior and before. And one of the interesting things I found was the people that came to San Francisco from other parts of the world around that time. Obviously, not just a lot of Chinese immigrants, but immigrants from all over the world. And the Ducks, who were a notorious gang, and I think that may be where the lovely duck reference in Warrior, where that was inspired from. But the Ducks were a San Francisco gang made up of Australians, and they were apparently quite brutal and quite thuggish, really tough kind of crowd that came over from from Australia after the gold strike.
Fascinating.
But yeah, I've digressed massively, and I'll get back to your question.
No, I'm happy to digress. This is what I should call my podcast, like tangent podcast or digression, because this is pretty much what we do all the time. So we're right at home now.
The attention deficit disorder is kicked in. And, but Cape Town is part of the world that I came to from my childhood. We always came here kind of towards the end of the year for our December, our Christmas holidays, which down in this part of the world is obviously summer, not in winter. So it's our long summer vacation.
Yeah.
And we would come down here quite often as a kid. And I really only fell in love with Cape Town as a young actor when I came down here to do a Shakespeare, and I'd grown up in Johannesburg. I'd attended university up there, gone to drama school there, and then I was working in the theater up there for a number of years, and then came and did the play down here. It was an open air theater, and I got to look at Table Mountain every evening when I got to work, and I kind of went, it's time for a change. I want to move here, and I did.
Yeah,
and I'm so happy I did.
Right. And it must be very nostalgic for you. Like you said, you had these summer vacations there and you would spend time. And did you revisit some of the places that you went to as a child? Or is that like, are those places to visit kind of like the go-to must-see things? Like if a friend, like for example, if I were to come visit you, where would you be taking me? Not that I'm inviting myself or anything.
No, I think you have to come, and it would be lovely to show you around.
Yeah.
So I think if you came at this time of year, this is literally, it's our first day of spring here now. I know you guys are going into fall, and the energy has shifted. The season definitely has shifted, and spring is in the air here, and we have amazing wildflowers in this part of the world, in the Western Cape at this time of year. So if you drive up the west coast from Cape Town, you'll see blankets, literally blankets of daisies of different colors on all over the roadside and kind of in the nature reserves, and it's quite spectacular.
Yeah.
So that's something good to do at this time of year. Table Mountain in itself is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And if you spend some time on it, hiking and riding a mountain bike and doing fun things like that, then you'll see why. It really is quite spectacular. And it has its own unique flora, its own unique kind of very biodiverse ecosystem that is specific just to Table Mountain, and different types of plants and flowers that you don't find anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And
I also kind of have this desire to go because my father, the way he made his way to the US was he was a seaman on ship, and that was always one of the stops that he had talked about, like he had stopped off at. And so I just there's like several different port cities that he would always mention. And it was something that, always jumped out at me, of course, as like a must go to. There's like, I have a map and got little pins on where I need to go, and it's definitely there. So, and you mentioned mountain biking, which of course I have to bring up because I see that you are not only this wonderful, amazing actor, but you are also kind of a triathlon expert, and you do all of these kind of amazing Ironman competitions. And I know that off air you're complimenting me, which is very generous of being a martial artist, but I can't imagine doing these kind of extreme sports. And I'd love to hear how you got started in triathlons and a little bit about your passion for that.
Right. Okay. So first off, there's no way in hell anyone can define me as a triathlon expert.
I don't know. You sound like you're pretty good.
So I think people who take Ironman seriously, they kind of take it to another level in terms of the science of it all.
Yeah.
I don't even own a power meter on my bike. So, and most triathletes out there would be going, "What?" But I really just do it for the enjoyment. It's riding a bike, running, swimming. It's kind of meditation for me, and it is how I get out of my head and just get into my body. And I really love that aspect of it. And I guess having a race to train towards is always good motivation to get out of bed in the morning on those days where you really don't feel like it. So I guess the races, I did my 3 full Ironmans that I've done. Those were all done over the period where I was getting divorced. So that helped me through a really difficult emotional period of my life. And I haven't actually done any full Iron distance races since then. I've kind of moved towards the half Ironman distance, which is, I find, a lot more doable just in terms of training time. The training hours for a full Ironman are crazy.
Yeah. And
So
just for our listeners, can you define the difference
mm,
between the two?
sure. I mean, it's so a full Ironman would be a 3.8 kilometer swim. So that's what, just 2.2 mile swim. And then 180K bike, which I guess is 112 miles. And then a marathon, 42.2 Ks, which is, what is it, 27, 28 miles. And then, so that's a full Ironman. So a half would be literally half of all of
Wow.
those distances.
Okay. Well, that's three more than I'll ever do in my lifetime. So I think you're an expert.
Never say never.
You haven't seen me run. I always tell people who do marathons, we have a lot of students that cross train, and I say, oh, I don't even want to drive 26 miles, let alone run it or walk it. So I don't know, but I would be there cheering you on if you were doing it again.
Thanks.
I'm good at that.
Okay. Yeah.
But so the training regiment, yeah.
It's not really sustainable if you're in a relationship and you want to see your friends and your family,
right?
Or if you have a full-time job, it's hard. I mean, I really take my hat off to the people out there who do or are able to do Ironman with 9 to 5 jobs, because they have to get up at like 3-4 in the morning to get on their bikes and do their runs. As an actor, you have those days where you're not working, and there are quite a few of them. So you have the luxury of using that time to train. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the shorter races are where it's at mostly. I might do 1 or 2 full iron distance races again in my life, but I think that'll be it. I think I'm going to stick to the shorter ones.
Well, the shorter ones, you make it sound like they're quote unquote easy, and those sound also impossible for me as well. But can you just, as a martial artist, I'm super interested in the training regimen for it. So give me a rundown of, even for training for the half Ironman, like what it would be like for you to wake up. Like, is it an all day training thing? Do you do different activities, different days, or do you cycle through them?
Well, I mean, the thing is, you've got to get used to your muscles performing while they're fatigued, obviously, because that's what the race is all about. So you're generally, personally, I did have a coach, and he was an ex-Ironman champion by the name of Reynard Tissink, and he'd consistently finished in the kind of top 10 at the world champs in Kona on a regular basis. So he was one of the best of his era. And I would train generally twice a day, with the exception of a Monday, which would be the rest day, which the rest day would essentially be, you'd go to the gym, do some core work, and do a nice easy swim. And but every other day, you would either be biking and swimming, or running and biking, or running and swimming on any given day. And then it would be best for your fitness just to break those up, do 1 session in the morning, 1 session in the afternoon. And then on the weekends, that would be generally just because of time. One generally had more time, or has more time on the weekends. That's when you do your brick sessions. Your brick sessions would be, where you would do your 180K bike, and then you'd run off the bike. So you'd literally get off the bike, put on your running shoes, and you wouldn't necessarily have to run far. It would just to get your muscles used to running while they were seriously fatigued. So, and getting used to getting off the bike after 6 hours and running, because you need to be used to that feeling when you do the race, because you honestly feel your legs feel like lead for the first, or can feel like lead for the first few Ks, and you've just got to. So you practice that, so that when the race comes and your legs do feel like lead, you can say to yourself, well, it's okay, because I know this is going to change in 3 or 4 kilometers time, and it does.
Well, you're not convincing me to ever join this race, but it's so commendable. And I'm always also curious about kind of the mind, the mental game of it, the mental aspect, because I often hear from, professional athletes and people who can do these extreme sports that there's just kind of something that like either clicks on or something mentally that happens that does make you keep going. Other than, of course, being very physically prepared and trained. But is there something that goes through your mind that like kind of pushes you to do that last kilometer or, keep swim? Well, obviously you can't not keep swimming because that would be bad. That one I think you have to keep doing, but like, I would be like, all right, I'm off the bike. I'm 6 hours sounds pretty crazy.
I think that's the reason why they put the swimming first. Last.
Yeah. I was going to say, it seems like it would be dangerous to do swimming last.
You definitely start cramping, but I guess, like you said, when you're swimming, you might just go, you know what, I'm done.
Yeah. The last race, that would be very sad documentary.
You can walk off when you're running, but you can't just move to the side when you're in the ocean.
No.
2 K's out.
Oh my gosh. And I have this, so tell me about the swimming part. Well, I didn't let you answer the question about the mental game. So does something happen for you mentally that allows you to push past that point of, where you just can't keep going anymore?
I think it's different for different people. And I think people get into all sorts of sports for different reasons. And I think some people do have the ability to kind of check out mentally. And so the pain, it's kind of weird, and you can just you can ride the pain almost. And I do feel that, I didn't know what people meant when they spoke about a runner's high until I had done my first Ironman. And like halfway through the run, suddenly I just was hit by such a wave of endorphins that I suddenly got it. And I guess that, that gets you through it to a large degree as well. And that kind of cuts out the pain. It is a very mentally challenging thing to do, especially the run.
Wow.
The bike is more discomfort, and that you've got to get through, and but that is like anything. That's why you do the long training sessions, so that when you get to race day, you can do this. You've done it all before a million times, and it's a lot like acting in that way. The 95% of our work as actors happens when people aren't watching. That's the work we do at home. And the very unglamorous side of it all, where we are sitting in rooms like I'm sitting in now, breaking down a script, breaking down the character, and thinking about your possible choices that you could make as an actor, and what is interesting, and the psychology of the character. And then you get to go to set, and it's actually just, then it's fun. Then you get to play. So it doesn't feel like work. It feels like you're living your joy. And I think it's the same for me with a race, whether it's a marathon or a triathlon or a trail run race or whatever. You're putting in the hard work every day when you're training, and you get to race day, and that's when you get to go out there and have fun and actually just give it everything you've got and enjoy it. And some days it's magical, and some days it isn't. A lot like acting. The days where you really feel that you're firing, both as an actor or an athlete, and everything's just going brilliantly. And the days where you feel a bit off. But if you've done the work and you've done the training, it doesn't actually matter too much, because the end result is usually pretty good anyway.
Right. It's interesting. I was just going to ask you that, how like your training with the triathlons kind of translate into acting. So that was a really, really great analogy. And so speaking of acting, of course, I have to talk to you about all the wonderful things you've been doing, and kind of your Banshee Warrior family, that you've kind of been able to kind of maintain this relationship. I just spoke to Hoon the other day, and he was like, oh my gosh, that's how I adore Langely. We go back to Banshee days. And so it's so cool to see kind of, that family kind of moving along together. And I have to say, I really hate you on Warrior. So that means you're doing a really good job, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you. I think. Look, it is like a family. Hoon is very much part of that. Jonathan Tropper, Lonnie Perister. You know, it's Banshee was a special part of my life, obviously, because it was the first time I got to go out to the States and work on a show there, and so the whole Banshee cast was really good to me as the kind of, you know, even though there were a lot of international actors on the show who weren't from the States. It was season 3 that I went in as a regular, and that was my, you know, my one season there, and they all welcomed me and kind of showed me the ropes and made me feel at home in Charlotte, North Carolina, very quickly. Yeah. And I mean, it's, yeah, I guess I wouldn't, if it hadn't been for that show, I wouldn't have made the friendships and relationships that I made, and I certainly wouldn't have got a call from Jonathan Tropper to read for Buckley and Warrior. So very grateful for that time in my life, and very grateful for the friendships that were made. And yeah, I'm still really good friends with most of the guys on the show. I'm in touch regularly, which is cool.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things I enjoy about your character, though, even though I just told you I hated your character, Walter Buckley, but it's nice when the writers do such a great job of painting the villain, quote unquote, as so multidimensional. Because as we get to see in the later seasons, your flashback episode, like there's a reason, you know, there's so much more going on with the character. When you first read for the character and kind of earlier on, did you already know like a lot of the backstory, or did that kind of develop as the story went on?
Yeah, I didn't know much. I knew some of where he was. I certainly didn't know about him, you know, in terms of where he was actually from. Which we find out right at the end of season 2, that we get an inkling of there's something else going on here that we hadn't been aware of.
Yeah.
That was kind of revealed after we shot the pilot, which I just thought was great. And you certainly, I can tell you, we've only scratched the surface as far as Buckley's concerned. There's a lot hidden that is going to be revealed about this guy.
Oh,
and
we have to wait a while.
Yeah, you do. But you know, it's I think with a character that what the writers do so well, not just Jonathan but the whole writing team, is they create these characters, as you said, that are multifaceted, multidimensional, and it's really important, you know, that we can find the humanity in everyone, including the guys we love to hate. And I think, you know, really in our world that we're living in right now, where we are also kind of divided and where there is so much polarization, I feel that's certainly something we've got to move towards and work on, is finding, you know, our common humanity and focusing on the things we do have in common. I know I certainly have to work on that, because I find myself getting easily pissed off and triggered by people for choices that they make that I don't necessarily agree with. And the reality is that we're all living our own truth, and we're all living our own story. And I don't know what someone else is actually going through unless I've walked around in their shoes. And I guess I do feel that that is something we are learning to do better. And that COVID, even though it has created this kind of huge rift and this big split, it's something I think we're all realizing we're going to have to do in order to move forward, is actually start really listening to people. Yes, and not just shouting.
So what you just said is just, it resonates 100% with me, because obviously, you know, we've been back and forth in email, and, you know, you said, oh, I can't wait to talk about Capetown. I'm a little biased. And I kind of kiddingly said, oh, it's fine. Yeah. I'm American. No one here is ever biased. And I'm pretty sure you got my sarcasm on that, but it has been polarizing, as you say. Yeah. And this pandemic, I thought, you know, was something that literally the whole world is suffering from. And it is something where we are all in this together. And yet I've felt, because I also live in Florida in America. Yeah. So it is specifically a state where it has been so divisive, even more divisive than the 2016 election, which was pretty divisive. And so it's just, I
Yeah.
mean, I guess it stemmed from there, right? It wasn't, not that it's more divisive. It's just, it feels, when you're putting things like public health at risk over like politics over public health, this is where you're like, okay, people are actually dying now. This isn't just, I believe this should be for healthcare, or it's not politics. And, you know, this is like, to me, like moral, ethical compass stuff. So I love what you just said, because I wish that more people felt the way you did and thought the way you did. And like you said, wanted to listen and ask questions and then actually wait for the response, because that is one of the biggest problems that we have here. And I don't mean to generalize the country, but you are sure watching our country as a reality show, because I've had the pleasure of actually traveling the world, and right before the election I was in New Zealand. Lovely people in New Zealand, and they were like, oh, your country is so interesting right now, you know, and it was just crazy. And I get the sense of, again, you know, they're like, oh, you're American. I thought you're Canadian. And I took that kind of as a compliment, and I'm proud to be American. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, I got why, because it's so crazy. So, I mean, what is it like? What is the climate like there where you are? Because it's just literally across the world, and I have no idea. But because you mentioned even, you know, just now that it was polarizing. So have you had the same challenges as here?
Yeah, very much so. I think I'm not sure what the percentage is today, but we are still less than 20% of our population is vaccinated.
Okay.
So we've got a ways to go. We did start a lot later,
right,
in the process, and I believe we are now at the stage where during the week we are vaccinating around 250,000 people a day. We're a population of 60 million people, and we are, when I say we're not up to 20%, that might be wrong. I think we might be on around 20% now. So, you know, we've got a ways to go, but as is the case in the US, there's a large proportion of our population, I believe around half, that don't want to get vaccinated.
So it's because of the hesitancy, not because of availability.
Yeah, I mean, and there is also, you know, it's been used as a political tool as well. You know, it's a government conspiracy. It's a Western conspiracy. It's, you know, there are similar, and people have gone down. Don't think that QAnon is purely an American thing. People have gone down huge QAnon rabbit holes here.
Really?
So, I mean, that is the thing about social media and the internet, is it's available all over the world. So, excuse me, you have people in South Africa going down the same conspiracy theories that you have in the States, and I say that obviously that's a personal belief that they're conspiracy theories. That is what I believe, and I mean, I think at this point in time, when I believe we've got to put the greater good of humanity first, and yes, we may have fears and concerns about the vaccine and whether there are any long-term side effects. I think we actually have to just believe the scientists and the doctors and take a leap of faith here and do what is best for the collective.
Yeah.
And for so many reasons. I mean, I guess I don't know if I want to get drawn into a whole COVID debate here in this time that we have, but I really think it's something that I think the healthcare workers also need us to take the added pressure off just by getting vaccinated, and also that'll save other people's lives as well who don't have COVID, who need the care and can't get it because the beds are full with COVID patients who largely are unvaccinated.
Yeah, no, I commend you actually for being outspoken. And it's actually something Hoon and I were talking about, because of course he's been posting so many things about vaccines and masking. We talked a lot about science, and I'm with you. I definitely believe that us having nanobots from vaccines or conspiracy theories, and I don't think it's our opinion. I think we're actually following science, which is fact-based and scientifically proven. So and again, like you said, it's not like we're here to just kind of discuss that, but I appreciate that worldview, because I think a lot of people here, we're just so inundated with what's happening in our circle, right? And what's happening in our country. And we just have no idea in other places that, the same struggle is real there, right? It's the same issues and the frustration, and how to talk to these people. And like you said, I think it's less about talking and more about listening, and then being able to kind of try to find a way to connect and know that this is for the greater good, right? And like I said, I'm in Florida, so it's like, enough said. Like, there's just so much going on that is just frustrating, but I do appreciate you sharing that and kind of talking about it, because it's been very jarring, and I know one of the things that Warrior has brought about, especially for the Asian community here in the States, is just so much pride for, Asian representation, and being a show that has kind of, broken down a lot of stereotypes. And of course, with the pandemic and, what I believe is a direct result of the former president saying a lot of things that were, just inciting a lot of the hate that was happening with the anti-Asian hate crimes. I feel a show like Warrior actually was so positive, and it was just like great timing to have something like that and to get picked up. And and I just want you to know, like, you're just really a part of a project also that's been so meaningful to Asian communities around the world, and particularly here during this crazy time.
Well, I think it's certainly a privilege for me to be a part of the production, knowing that it means so much to many people, and this is, I again go back to this period in time where I think it is a great opportunity for learning, for shifting old beliefs and old belief systems. I myself, I've shifted in ways that I'm proud of, and I'm proud that that I can honestly say I'm not very far along the path. There's still so much to learn from other people, from other cultures, from other people with other viewpoints that are different from mine. And I, not that long ago, was one of the people who was shouting at other people on Twitter, telling them to shut up and fuck off and just be quiet. You're stupid. You're a moron. It's not going to get us anywhere. Ultimately, right. We're not going to be able to connect with other people by carrying on in the same way that we've been carrying on for thousands of years. Something's got to shift. We've got to try something different, because the way we've been living isn't working.
Yeah, well, I feel like what you just mentioned was it's almost like the stages of grief, and it's okay. Like, it's a reactive to be angry and frustrated, because we see, friends and loved ones dying. We see people who are at risk, and like, my sister's immunosuppressed. So for people that don't want to take that into consideration and are like, it's fine if you don't want to get vaccinated, then stay home and wear a mask and be distanced and do all of things, right? Like, I understand. I'm not forcing something, but then do no harm to others. Like, you're okay doing something as long as you're not harming someone else, right? And so I feel that is harmful for others. So it's that's absolutely kind of where I draw that line. And I'm very fortunate at my Kung Fu school. I'm able to set all the rules. So basically at the school, I tell my students, look, I'm conducting class as if my sister was in the middle of the room. And that's how safe I want this environment to be. And these are the rules, and that's it. But that's just in my little bubble, right? And so and it's really nice, because that is something that you kind of said earlier, which is just kind of finding something that we can all kind of connect with. Like, everybody at my school wants to do Kung Fu or Tai Chi, and that's why they're there. And they have different views for sure, but because they have a common desire and respect for something, they kind of follow, the rules. And I think, like, if that could just kind of be, multiplied out, it would be nice. But it just feels we're so far from that. And I do love talking to you about this, though. And I appreciate you, like, kind of going to go back and forth.
It certainly would help if our elected leaders chose to, believe the scientists and, echo what the scientists are saying, rather than not. Let's leave it at that.
I'm with you. I feel your frustration.
And I do want to add that, I'm I've seen Hoon with some of the interactions that Hoon has with a lot of these people, and I mean, I would have given up. Where he stays engaged with a lot of people and has such an incredible engagement where he really truly listens and hears the other person's perspective, and he can go on for hours like that, and all in the pursuit of trying to shift someone's perspective. And I don't know how he finds the patience. And God knows he's a greater man than I am or could ever be, because
I'm with
I
you.
would be like, okay, I'm done.
Yes.
Bye-bye. It was nice
I
chatting to you.
disengage. Yeah, I'm with you. I disengage. So we actually had quite a lengthy discussion on it too. So I'm excited that these two conversations are going to go pretty close together.
I think if I had to choose anyone I know to be the leader of the free world, I think I would choose Hoon Lee.
Oh, I love that.
I was thinking about that. I got off the phone with him the other night, and it's like, he's probably the brightest, most patient, most kind person with the possibly the strongest sense of a moral compass. Out of everyone I know, he's the kind of the rounded package.
Okay.
And of course he'll hate to hear this, and he'll probably cringe and he'll be mortified by it. But I honestly think it's true. He's one of those people. He's one of those really truly golden people who I think has, and he works. He puts in the work at trying to become an evolved human, and he seems to have done a much better job of it than most of us can hope to.
Wait, we're all a work in progress, so that's okay as long as we're progressing and not regressing.
No.
I think
and we shouldn't be. I shouldn't be comparing, myself to anyone.
Well, I get your sentiment, because I mean, I spent a lovely time talking to him, and it was a very intense conversation, and luckily we ended with comics. We kind of ended on a nice light note, but I was awesome. Like, wow, this conversation was intense, and I get that. I get why actually you would say that. So the title of this episode would be like Langley Kirkwood votes for Hoon Lee.
Yes.
Like
homage to
Hoon
Lee.
Homage to Hoon Lee. Oh my God, I have to text him after this conversation, be like, were your ears ringing? Oh, okay. Back to acting.
Yes.
But one of the things I always find fascinating when I'm watching a film or TV show is, my husband and I are super engaged, we're watching TV, and then we see an interview, or we see an after the episode, and we always hear the accents, and it just, it's amazing to me. And I looked up your resume, and you had all these different accents that you were able to do. And I'm sure you studied and everything, but I always find that really, really fascinating, especially because like even the English accent, there's so many different variations of it, and they're very, very specific. And can you talk to me a little bit about the practice, like, because that's a skill in itself.
Yeah. So I do think, I watched a lot of movies as a kid, and I watched a lot of movies from all over the world, and some of them were English, and some of them weren't. So I suppose that, coupled with being trained at a drama school where we did a lot of theater, and we had the opportunity to really fuck things up badly as many times as we possibly could until we got things right, with a I suppose constructively critical audience in our peers. That environment certainly does help with accents. And most of the films I watched were, British films or American films. So, and similarly, a lot of the television that I watched growing up. So I had an ear, I suppose, for those accents, and because they're just so widely spoken. Also fortunate enough to have family. I was actually born in the UK, but I even though I consider myself very patriotically South African, I've spent a lot of time there over the years. In fact, I lived in London for a time, and I've got family in the north of England. And I lived in the States as well. I lived in New York for a while. I spent some time in Miami, a few months, but also, spending time in North Carolina, and I also spent some time in Atlanta. and then spending a few years living in LA, I guess that helps as well. It helps knowing and learning the psychology of people, I suppose, or the getting inside their heads, getting inside the culture a little bit. And I do find that helps immensely with accents. Having an understanding of the people, having a feel for them, having sat down with people from those, communities, perhaps. That certainly helped me with accents. And then there is a great website for any actors listening who have an interest in doing accent work that don't know about it.
Yeah.
And it is the International Dialect of English Archives. The word idea, if you just Google idea accents or whatever, do a search with that, but idea, they have amazing resources in terms of the accents that they have. You can find just about every accent spoken in the English language on that website, and but you basically there's a section of prose that is about 2 or 3 minutes long, and everyone who gives of their time to the archive basically reads the same bit of prose. And then they speak about themselves for a few minutes as well. And it's fascinating I often will just get lost in the website for hours and for days, just listening to the different accents. But it is really, really very helpful.
Yeah. No, website. I'm definitely going to check it out. Next time we talk, I'm going to try to have a different accent.
Oh, awesome. I look forward to it.
I was loving that with Jason as well. When I spoke to Jason, because he has this just like lovely, lovely, like meld of an accent, and you never know which one you're going to get. And he told me the same thing on set. If him and Andrew were talking, they would go like super into their British, accent, and then it would mess him up, because he said, they'd go back and forth. And
I'm a total chameleon as well. I do slip very easily into English when I'm with English friends, American with American friends, and when I'm with my Johannesburg friends. People in Johannesburg, they speak very differently to the way I'm speaking right now, a lot of them. So next time you interview me, I'll do my Johannesburg accent.
Okay, yes, I'll get the Johannesburg Langley.
just for 5 minutes, because if I do any longer than that, I think people eventually would go, "What the hell's he saying?" I don't think Americans would be able to listen to it.
I love it. I love it. No, I find it fascinating. And so I'm dying to go and check out that website. So I was going to ask you as well, like, I know that your hobby is your hobby. No, you do the triathlons, but is that what you consider your downtime? Like, what do you consider downtime or relaxing time? Because even though acting is your job, triathlons don't seem very relaxing. Is there things you like to do to kind of like bring it down?
I mean, I love reading and I love cooking. Those are, if I'm cooking, I do every day, just because I love eating a lot. That's what Hoon and I have that in common.
Yes. But, I actually had it on my list to ask you about specific foods that are kind of, specific to the area, because that's one of the first things I ask about is restaurants and food and home. I mean, I prefer home cooked meals, so that'll be fine when I come. But tell me about the food.
Well, the food in Capetown,
and your food.
So, I mean, so there is the Western Cape, especially, definitely the local food here has a Malaysian influence, because there were a lot of, when the Cape was a colony back in the 16, 17, 1800s, there was Malay slaves were actually brought here to the colony, and a lot, so the Malaysian influence in the cooking of the Western Cape is quite strong. The kind of African cooking and African cuisine is more prevalent up north. Not so much in Cape Town. Cape Town, actually, in terms of the restaurants, in terms of the cuisine, is not very African. It is quite international, quite cosmopolitan, and a lot of kind of fusion restaurants where they will take elements of African cuisine, but also take elements from Eastern, from European, from American. There are a lot of incredible restaurants here. Like when I say, and I mean, I've lived in New York. I've spent time in Paris. I've spent time in London, so when I say that there are amazing restaurants in Cape Town, you must know that they're good.
Oh yeah,
And
I am a huge foodie, so this is exciting for me. Yet this has moved to the top of the list of why I want to go there now. Like I'm just like writing all this down, and like Langley said, I'm gonna play these sound bites where you said I could come out there and to remind you. But
no, you got it.
What do you like to cook?
Lots of great restaurants.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. What do you like to cook at home?
So I've got to be honest. There's obviously, in a more conscious, evolved world, there is a great move to get away from eating animals, which I'm in awe of, and I think is wonderful and amazing. I'm just not that evolved yet. I tried, and I tried, actually. I was vegan while I was living in LA. I actually tried veganism for a whole month. And it just wasn't for me. My body actually didn't feel good.
Right. Well, as an athlete,
I did feel like I was lacking iron. I felt like I was craving meat, and my meat of choice is lamb.
Okay.
So that is, I'm definitely, in fact, I have friends and family who refer to me as Langely because
Langely.
but purely because I like to eat it so much.
I know, but it's still so cute.
But obviously, look, I don't, my red meat intake is not nearly as high as it used to be. So I do enjoy cooking lamb. I enjoy cooking curries. I even though I grew up in Johannesburg, I spent a lot of time in Durban, which is on the east coast of South Africa, and there's a large Indian community there. So when I was younger, I did eat a lot of curries, and so that's something that I really enjoy. And I suppose the one downside to speaking to you on my phone as I am is that I'm getting.
It's all good.
I'm getting phone calls. That was my mother trying to call
Hi,
me. I'll call her when we're done. She'll probably try another 5 times.
This is great. Like I said, our episode is very special. This is fantastic. It's very organic. It's a very natural conversation. Earlier, you had mentioned that you like to watch a lot of, American films, British films as a child. What were some of those films that you enjoyed?
So, again, I had a friend who lived down the road, and in the late 70s, that's really dating me now, and early 80s, growing up, he was one of the few friends that we had who had a Betamax VCR. This was just before VHS took over, and JVC kind of plugged the VHS marketing like they did. But his family had about 10 movies on Betamax, and one of them was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Okay.
The Clint Eastwood, Sergio Leone, which we just watched again and again and again. Another one was a Woody Allen film, called Love and Death with Diane Keaton. And the other one that we watched all the time was The Life of Brian, Monty Python film.
Wow, it's very well-rounded, very cinephile collection as a young child.
And then there were a few South African films as well. There was a film called E Lollipop, which was a South African film about 2 young kids who basically they grow up. One kid is black, one kid is white. They're growing up in apartheid South Africa, and they're growing up and struggling with, I suppose, the shit and the baggage that their parents are starting to dump on them about, why they can't be friends, and they're not quite getting it.
Right.
And the film basically it explores their friendship, and then it ends with kind of a really tragic but very heroic ending. And it's E-lollipop is how it's pronounced, but if you were to read it, you would pronounce it I-lollipop, because it's a little I, as in an iPhone. And that was very memorable. But we used to, I mean, so there wasn't a great collection. There was Casablanca as well. And then there was The World at War, which was, black and white, mostly black and white series. I don't know if you ever saw any of it, but it was a British documentary series in about 44 one-hour episodes, chronicling the Second World War.
Oh, okay.
With the late great Laurence Olivier narrating the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
And so that was we probably watched that whole series like 3 or 4 times. So my World War II history is pretty solid.
Yes, I was gonna say, oh my gosh, let me get my husband in here because he loves history and watches every doc. And oh my goodness, yeah. And there's so much on World War II. There's so much. So, but yeah, it's pretty solid, I would guess so. And is it just because you really loved watching film that you kept watching, or you just love history?
I guess there were just so many times we could watch a movie and then we'd need a break from that. And I suppose there was something strangely terrifying, yet also, really interesting about the world at war and the Second World War. And I suppose it was this, back then it felt like ages ago, but in reality, both my grandfathers fought in that war. So it was something that I felt I had a connection to.
Yeah.
My great uncle was a fighter pilot during the Second World War, and he was shot down by the Germans over the Mediterranean. And so I felt I had a connection. And speaking of family connections, because when I was doing my internet stalking of you, when you asked me to come on the show, I saw that you have some roots in the Caribbean.
Yes. Yes.
And I was wanting to ask about that because I do too.
Really? Yes. Well, my mom was born and raised in Jamaica. So I still have family there. And that is where that is the accent I will slip into with my Jamaican family.
Very good. Yes. Very good. Okay. Yes. So my dad is born in St. Vincent.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, which is very close to Barbados.
Very close. Yeah, very close.
And my dad moved back to the island a number of years ago. And
nice.
And so has been living there I guess since around 2000, and I think early 2000s he moved back to the island and has kind of been spending half of the year there, and he could spend half of the year in the UK, but moved back there full time a while ago. And he's a real history buff as well and loves history. Yeah. And he was telling me a lot about the island itself. And what I didn't know is that the much bigger island of Barbados it was formed, even though St. Vincent itself is a volcanic island. And you may have heard on the news that the volcano, in fact, was erupting recently, in fact, earlier this year. But the island of Barbados was formed by all of the ash and detritus that was spewed out of the St. Vincent volcano and formed this much bigger island. Yeah. Because St. Vincent is quite a small island, but Barbados is a lot bigger. And so it was. I just found that interesting. This tiny little, quite insignificant island of St. Vincent gave birth to this the big island of Barbados, which is like the rich cousin.
Yes, well, that's nature for you, right? Wow, that is so fascinating. No, and I know we have to wrap up soon, even though we've had some interims. But speaking of World War II, it's kind of interesting because you watched so much about it, and like you said, your history is on point. And I know that there's a lot of dates and things and whatnot. But what I found interesting is that, kind of the rise of the Nazis and that mentality and everything, and how we've had a lot of analogy to a lot of the right and what's happening now, especially here and throughout the world, honestly, in terms of kind of seeing a bit of that repeat, and
Yeah.
being that you've watched so much of that history, what's your
Mm.
take on that? Because people, get very put off when
Mm.
I would analogize, former president with
Yeah.
former, German
Yeah.
leader. Like it just shuts people down. So I tend to not have
Mm.
the conversation, but you really can
Yeah.
help draw these parallels of
I
taking
I
people
think we,
who
yeah.
are downtrodden and then just kind of giving them this sense and these ideas and just how you kind of get the masses to follow you. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me, but I'd love to hear your take on it because you're, the history buff now.
Look, I think it's a very appropriate analogy, and I think it would be foolish to ignore the similarities. The fact that Europe in the 1930s and the world at large really had a lot of strongmen, fascist style leaders, and the world similarly. It's not just the obvious man with the orange suntan that comes to mind. There's you've got leaders in other countries as well, in Europe, in the Middle East, in South America, in Asia, in South Africa. We've gone through a very similar period with a very similar leader in Jacob Zuma, who I honestly feel, who also happens to be quite good friends with Vladimir Putin. So, join the dots, and I think it's quite possible that someone in your neck of the woods looked at the playbook of our guy and went, "Hey, hang on, this guy's onto something. You can basically just put all your friends in government and various members of your family, and people
Regardless of
actually
qualification.
Yeah, and people won't actually do anything about it, even though it's not really supposed to be done."
Yeah.
So I think people like that, those kinds of leaders, they don't care about what is considered right or moral. I think they'll push the boundaries and see how much they can get away with, and then they'll back off a little when people actually call them on their stuff. So holding people accountable is so important.
Yeah.
In especially when it comes to government and to leadership positions. People, we can't let people get away with the kind of things that we've been seeing leaders of countries get away with. It can't continue like that. The world certainly doesn't. It's a fragile place right now on in the tipping point of what it can actually sustain. And if these kinds of people carry on just pillaging, I think it's not looking good. It won't be looking good for us.
Yeah. So two important things there is to learn from history, and which is why history is so important. And the second is to vote for Hoon Lee.
There we go.
For fear
of the Hoon Lee political party.
Hoon Lee political party, yes. Wow, I don't think he realized he was going to be such a big part of this conversation. But Langley, I really hope that you come back on and talk to me, because there's so many other things that I wanted to ask you. And in fear of Zoom shutting me down again today, and for us having to do a take 3, and you've already been so generous with your time. So I hope you'll.
I would love to. I'd love to come back on. And in fact, something I started this week, which I've been meaning to since I was a kid, and that is to get into martial arts.
Oh.
In a real way that is meaningful, and I've undertaken that this past week. So
I want to hear about this.
Well, let's save that.
We'll save that for the next show, when the before and the after, like you're as you study. Oh my goodness!
I'm currently beginning a 3-month probationary kind of phase at the school I'm at.
Okay, what if you don't mind me asking what style you're doing?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm looking at Tai Chi, and I'm looking at Mantis style Kung Fu. And Wing Chun. So yeah,
you're speaking my language. I mean, I do Tai Chi and Mantis Kung Fu.
Well, there we go. So
this is very exciting.
So I've started studying under a really special guy, a master by the name of Sifu Wayne Pinto. Here in Capetown, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that journey takes me. So let's save that for.
We're gonna save this. Yes.
Our next conversation.
That means we have to talk again now. All right. Well, Langley, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and I hope you have a great day.
Sifu Mimi, it's been an honor.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.